What will the future role of public space be? What are the new policies that public space needs?
The short answer is I have no idea. And anyone who says they know what the answer is making it up, and they might as well just go to Las Vegas. What I do know is that there have been a series throughout, you know, our history. There have been a series of pandemics. I mean, it's not the first pandemic we've ever had. And so there's been a series of crises that have altered cities, that have altered the way we live. So I think the answer to the first question is I don't know, but I would look at history. And history tells us that, you know, from cholera, we got sewers. From the Black Plague, we got different sorts of, you know, Venice was emptied out after the plague, I think. And so it changed, you know, different sorts of things. I'm not a historian, so I can't really tell you. So, but then I will tell you that history is written by the winners, and history is written by the people who take advantage of the crises. And so there is, you read the press, even the Times yesterday or Monday or Sunday had this big thing that said, is the car going to save LA? And, you know, the thesis was written, the thesis was proffered by a journalist or a writer or somebody, as far as I can tell, had absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of city planning or anything. But she was like, well, if I drive everywhere, then I'm not going to get the COVID thing. And so since everyone drives in LA, then no one will get the coronavirus. And, you know, it's just people postulating. So, but what I would like to happen is I would like to, I would like that people sort of realize that the sort of the fundamental things about what you do. Well, let me back up a little bit, because one of the things that I work on, and that we sort of talk about in kind of public space, and green mobility is what we call it, is the 15-minute city, and or the 20-minute city, the 10-minute, whatever it is. And so there's this notion that you can get everything you need within a 10, 15, 20-minute sort of area, whether that's on foot or whether that's on bike. So it's 800 meters or maybe 3 kilometers at most. And so if you organize yourself spatially such that you can sort of, your neighborhood is self-sufficient, and then maybe you have to leave the neighborhood for other things, then you're minimizing your contact with the whole other population sets, and you're maximizing your time out of doors. I mean, if you're out of doors outside, then you're less likely to get sort of this pandemic. And so I think that you know, the people who are pushing green mobility and public space and the use of public space, they really need to align themselves with the people who are doing public health and doing climate change and doing energy sustainability, and also align themselves with the people who are doing childcare, who are saying, you know, if we can figure out a way so that we're not all commuting and spending crazy time going here and there and, you know, dropping off our kids, and we're much more in tune with where the child care and I mean, so, you know, there's this public health, there's child care, there's climate change, there's all these, there's sustainability, there's resiliency, there's all these kind of forces, of positive forces that, you know, I mean, what I'm finding is that if you live in a place where you can get outside and there's good public space and you can exercise and the streets don't have so much traffic and you can go ride your bike in the park, you know, it's it's kind of okay. I mean, it's not to it's terrible to have to say that. You know, the people are dying. There's 100,000 people dead. There's people in the hospitals, but it's, you know, some of that is really, I think what I've read is that a lot of that is rated not to density, but to crowding. And so that's actually another sort of little element that people are going to get into. Is it density or is it crowding? And for example, you know, if it's density, then Hong Kong and Singapore and Shanghai and Cairo would just be full of the coronavirus, and they're not. But neighborhoods in New York are full of coronavirus, and it's associated more with crowding. And like I was just seeing a piece yesterday about the Navajo tribe in northwest New Mexico, and they have overcrowding, or they're just, because their familial units are, they were saying 8, 9, 10 people are living in one home, and maybe the home's not that big, but so one person gets it, suddenly 9 people have it, as opposed to, you know, if you only have a family unit of 2.5 people, then one person get it. It's only, you know, 2.5 people get it, kind of thing. And so this is overcrowding. There's going to be a lot of pressure by the people who are selling cars, who are selling highways, who are selling suburban sprawl, who are selling kind of, they're selling stuff, and they're going to be selling you peace of mind. And that's going to be, that's what's going to have to resist. So my prognosis is that if we don't do anything about it, we're not going to like what we end up having to buy.
What will be the future role of our streets? What will be the new forms of human transportation? It's
really the same answer. And so let's just take I was noticing that there's in Texas, there's a train that goes from the airport to downtown. And they've said during the pandemic, the train is for free. I mean, it was only costing $2 anyway, but they're like, you know what, forget it. You don't have to buy a ticket, because that's gonna reduce you touching things, and that's gonna, you know, contactless payments or whatever, and that's gonna also reduce interactions between the ticket seller and the ticket checker and all that. And so this would be a good thing that came out of the pandemic, because the history of fares in public transport is the history of the sort of rogue police activity, and you know, much more civilized countries don't have fares. They just, well, they have a fare, but it's kind of built in, and you buy a ticket, and the ticket's good for a year or something like that. And you know, so if we have those kind of outcomes, it would be good, because then you would get to a more equitable transit system. Other people are talking about, you know, the problem is not with buses and trains. The problem is with overcrowded buses and trains. You know, in Tokyo, there's the you know, everyone sees the videos of people shoving people into the subway system, and say, well, that's not going to happen anymore, or that's not going to happen for a while. And so, you know, so how do you deal with that? Do you telework? Do you run more trains? Maybe so again, if the outcome is let's run more trains and let's run more buses and let's have more frequent transit service so that it's not overcrowded, and let's make it more equitable, and not sort of arrest people for fare evasion and stuff like that, then that would be a good outcome. Alternatively, you know, there are a number of people who, for example, like in Manhattan, they say, oh, you know, we're all going to be driving to work. And, you know, mathematically and spatially, that's not any way possible. And so, but who are the people who are pushing back in the public sphere? They're pushing back on, who are the people who are pushing back, who are saying, you know, this is not really possible. You cannot organize London and Hong Kong and New York and Buenos Aires and Milan and Berlin with everyone driving. You just can't do it. It's not physically possible. But still, there's this sort of odd narrative in the public realm, in newspapers and journalists. There's this odd narrative, this sort of windshield perspective, like, oh, if we just, if everyone drove, then no one's going to get the virus and it's all going to be good. And it's just like the people are delusional. And, then along comes AI and autonomous vehicles. And I've done a little bit of work on this, a study to work on it. It's more of the same crap. So it's just like, oh, but then there's going to be no driver. It's like, okay, but it's still a car. And, unless you're going to start shoving 4, 5, 6 people in a car, well, then it's not going to make sense. But even if you do that, but then it's like, well, we can't put 6 people in the car because they're all going to get coronavirus. So it's like only one person in the car. And then it's like, well, we're going to have to make some sort of like a smaller car and like a pod car. And then, but it's going to be out, and it's just like, dude, that's a bike. Actually, I saw another thing just yesterday or something where there was a survey about commuting, and it said, do you miss your commute? Or like, would you like to return after the pandemic? Would you like to return to commute the same way you commuted? And they broke it down by how you commuted, not by distance or whatever. So the car drivers, the bus riders, the walkers, the people riding a bike, or the people walking, and the people who were riding the bike were like 95% of them said, I kind of miss riding the bike every morning. It was kind of okay. It was my way. I got a little exercise, fresh air. I got to work. It was okay. I rode along the river, something like that. And I think the car users were down at like 2/3 or maybe 50-50. They're like, I'm so glad I'm not having to drive anywhere every morning. So, there's these kind of, but will the forces of good be able to take advantage of these things and organize cities so that you can ride your bike? I mean, Buenos Aires, I love the fact that the city is named Good Air, and it's like the climate is really nice there, and it's wonderful. You ride around, so can we organize ourselves so that we can do that? So let's think about post-pandemic. Is that you want to be able to go around your city or your neighborhood in the open. It's sort of like after cholera, we got sewers. And so after coronavirus, we're going to get open air, like, you could get hermetically sealed conveyance, units of conveyance that are, constantly being scrubbed and sanitized, which is okay. That's one thing. But the other thing you can do is you can get open air stuff, which is, so it's maybe like, maybe the thing to history is look at Bologna or porticos in Cairo. There's porticos in Milan, of course. Okay, remember the Galleria. When did they come up with the Galleria? For what reason? Because there were shops, and usually the streets were narrow, and they had 4 or 5 meters, and they had the shops. And then somebody, I can't remember who did the Galleria. Well, after they invented glass, and they had to be able to have the glass, this big superstructure in the mid 19th century. And then the guy who invented the Galleria said, let's make the glass over the shopping street. And then so instead of having a narrow shopping street, we can have a wider shopping street, which has a nice terrazzo floor and stuff like that. And then you can have a cafe and it's shaded and stuff like that. So maybe what we're going to have is maybe we're going to bring back arcades, or that, like in Morocco, or in where you're from, Iran. Who's from Iran? in Isfahan, you have the continuous, the Fez is in Morocco, but what's it called in Isfahan, where you have the market that goes throughout the city? It's
Yeah.
What's it called?
It's a square like it's a huge square that it's called Meydan Naqsh Jahan. It's Naqsh Jahan. So it's like the mosque is on the one side. It's an old school. It's the hammam that it's like an old bath. It's all around.
Right, in Isfahan.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's the mosque and the madrasa, and then there's the souk keeps going from the souk.
Exactly.
Goes
Around it.
the souk's around it, right? Like that.
Yeah.
It's covered. It's covered. It's like the similar one in Morocco, and they built some like a fake one in Doha. If you've ever been to Doha, it's like a fake souk. It's a nice place to have a coffee, but it's fake. And then so maybe, you know, what is this? What are we going to learn from from Middle Eastern Islamic architecture or Islamic city design about how to design souks that have good air circulation so that you can be outside but also be enclosed? That would be an interesting, I don't know, but maybe that's too enclosed. I don't know. But then you get into this whole thing about the designs of many not arcades, they're sort of arcades, but you know, you often go to, there used to be sort of a barn-like structure or a farmer's market, and the roofs are like this, and then at the top of the roof they have like a separate roof up here, and there's a clear story here, and that's where the hot air comes out. And so this is just standard ventilation procedures for large buildings that have angled roofs. And so, which is the same thing as in the souk. You have a covered souk, built out, and then you have another layer, but in here there's the holes and stuff, like the air comes out. You just do the diagram of how the air flow. So maybe what's going to come out of this, or what could come out of this, is the building typology that's used much all around. And so you can have covered streets that are sort of virus free because they have good air circulation, but there's just somehow trying to think, there's some other ones that I've seen, like shade structures. There's one in, a weird one in San Francisco, but that's not really a good one. Anyway, you know, are we going to invent a new building typology for sort of public infrastructure that is virus free? I've never thought about that.
What should be the role of technology and AI in rethinking the possibilities for public space? Can AI be used to control part of the city according to unexpected events?
The way that technology and artificial intelligence and information systems has altered the public realm, no one has planned for it. It's unplanned. You know, the fact that we all have a GPS in our phone, no one planned that. There was no city planner that I know of, or mayor, or somebody said, let's everyone get a GPS, put it in their phone and we can be able to track it. No one ever did that. It happened because of something else. And so, you know, cities use technology, they rely on technology to be great. You know, you can have LED lights, which is a new invention, and then you can have a solar kind of thing, which battery pack and powers the lights, and you have solar powered LED lights, and that turn on and off at dawn and dusk. I mean, that's technology, and that's a good thing because you need light during the night, but not during the day. And if you could have all your infrastructure solar powered so that you don't have to run conduits and wires, and that the cost of providing that light is a lot less. Are there other sort of, people talk about we're going to have some sort of a contact tracing GPS that we're going to put on our phone. And so if you've been infected, I don't know how far that's going to go. In America, I would say that's going to go less far than it's going to go in China. But then again, like 10 years ago, this wasn't even a question. So, and 10 years from now, there'll be some other sort of revolution. So I don't really have my answer about AI is that if it gets us stuff that we kind of wanted already and makes it better, then yes. But the nature of technology is such that we might not know what we want or that is possible. And so, it's a struggle, I think, for municipalities and governments to kind of understand these things because they don't know what they are. And, and again, it's the phone company selling minutes for data and then having all that data and then selling that data to municipalities and to governments. Again, you're setting yourself up for that. You're having to buy what someone's selling, which may not be in your interest. But because the way the system is set up, you're forced to participate in this way. So I don't know if that made any sense, but it comes back to this notion about, a long time ago when they started with radio and TV, it was the airways were free. And so the government said, this is the airway is free. And if you transmit, you have to, you have to participate in the system. And then they went to cable systems and things like that. And so you didn't have to participate, and you could pay for it. And so this is the same thing about, we are giving away the frequencies on which mobile phone works, but then we're having to pay for the data that's been collected by the people who are providing the mobile phones, which to me sounds backwards. It seems to me like if it's a public infrastructure, the airways is you're utilizing those anyway, but that's a side topic. But the point is that again, it's the answer is that if we can get technology to provide what we want and make our lives better and more equitable and sort of more enjoyable, then yes. But I will submit that we can't control that because we don't know what those answers are, because we don't know what the technology is going to be able to provide. And that's the quandary. And so you kind of just have to, you just kind of have to go for it. I mean, you could argue that technology has allowed, I don't think you could argue, I think it's a fact. Technology and our ability to travel has allowed the pandemic to go around the world in a week, which is what it did, or a month. Because of technology, now we have to deal with this pandemic. Like, if we didn't have the technology, no one ever went to Wuhan, then it would just be in Wuhan. But now we don't know where it came from. Did it come from Seattle, from Asia, or did it come from Europe? Did it come from Italy? It was, what I mean? So it's sort of like technology, all it is it's just it's just a tool. It's just it's just the ability to, I mean, think about it from an architecture point of view. when I was in school, we were still drawing on with the parallel bars, you know. And before that, my dad used a T-square, and then there was the parallel bar, and then there was AutoCAD, and now there's Revit. Okay, or whatever the next thing is, and now there's BIM. Now, has any of that made any of the buildings that you've ever designed better? You know, maybe they're more analytical, and maybe you can you know, yes, that you can design the solar panels, you can design the window shades so that they go up and down at a particular time, track the sun, and mitigate heat loss and solar gain and stuff like that. Yes, but that's a technology there. But you know, has the function of drawing, has the fact that you can draw and make more iterations of stuff, has that improved anything? I don't know. So I tell the story about the bus, and it used to be there would be a schedule for the bus, and you didn't know when the bus was, or maybe there was on the sign there was a schedule that said this is when the bus. And I remember we used to look at the schedule of the bus, and it would say the bus is coming at 3:15 and 3:30. In 3:45, and I would tell my kids, I would say, this is when the bus is not going to come, because the bus is always early or late. At least we have an idea, but at least we kind of know. But then now my kids have the bus schedule on the phone. They don't even have the bus schedule. They look at their phone, they're like, oh, look, a bus is coming, or it's going to come in 3 minutes or something like that. And then now maybe the next thing is that the information is going to be the bus is crowded, or the next bus is not crowded. And so because of the coronavirus, I'm going to take the next bus, not this bus, or something like that. So I'm going to stay in the cafe. And because of your ticket is, because we're not checking tickets and we have the ticket, everyone has a ticket on their phone, then whatever, we don't have to exchange money and blah, 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 blah. And so in this case, technology can be good, and it could even be better. But then I ask myself, if you're trying to get somewhere and the bus is crowded, or the train is crowded, or the highway is crowded, but you still need to get somewhere, are you really going to wait 10 minutes for the next bus that's less crowded? Because you need to get wherever you're going to go. And are we going to start organizing our lives based on, like, if we were going to do that, then we would only travel at 3 o'clock in the morning, because then the bus is empty. But we're not doing that. And so, you know, so it's like, what is technology going to get us? It's going to get us more and more information. And then what are we going to do with that information? And then that's where I kind of come back to, it's just like, you know what? I walk up the street, I go to get a thing of bread. And, you know, my wife went for a bike ride today, and she came back with cabanossi. You know what cabanossi is? You don't know cabanossi. It's Polish. You know what the big sausage is? And I was watching football, and she said, look, here's some cabanossi, and then it had the mustard and the black bread. And she got all this because she was on her bike, and she went to the Polish butcher, and she was outside, and just, there was, you know, it's like, but the technology is, we knew the store was open because she looked on Google Maps and said, okay, the store's open now. But you know, it's just like this, like, okay, what do I really need? You know, and also Dorkman was playing, this is another thing. This is also having to do with sort of public space. So the German league started last Saturday, right? And if you watch the first game, there was like no sound, and you could hear them kick the ball. Like I'm sitting in my living room here, and I'm watching on the TV, and they have the game in Germany, and they kick the ball, and you can hear it, you know, and you can hear the whistle, you can hear them kick the ball, and you can hear them talking to players, just like over here, you know, they can hear them talking because there's no crowds. And then this game I just watched, they had piped in crowd noise. So, you know, they go, you know, there was no one in the stands. And so my daughter comes in, she's looking at it, she's like, who's making all the noise? There's no one in the stands. I'm like, that's because there's no one in the stand, but they piped in the noise from like a game from 3 years ago or something like that. And they're doing, you know, and when the whistle blows and it's the yellow card against their team, and they're like, you know, and so now we're going into this notion. Now this actually, so this has to go with public space, because now what we're saying is that instead of 80,000 people in the stadium, okay, and you have this whole convergence of people and the trains and everyone's going there, the bus, or however they're getting there, and instead of this convergence of people, now no one's in the stands. They're still playing football, and they have piped in noise, so it kind of sounds okay. So the people who are watching at home say, okay, this sounds like a real game. It seems like a real game. But no one has to go there. But instead what we're doing is then we're going to have every pub is going to have they're going to have more big screen TVs, or maybe they're going to set up, like in my neighborhood, when they have the World Cup on downtown, they set up a big screen, and the Women's World Cup and the regular World Cup, and they have people watching it live, because no one can go to, you know, wherever the game is. And so maybe what happens to public space is that public space becomes like these sort of virtual events in public space. And you know what I'm thinking of is in Bangkok. You've been to Bangkok? Who here has been to Bangkok? No?
I've been to.
So do you know the night market in Bangkok? It's like 2 football fields.
Yeah.
It's so big that there's a band at either end, and they're both playing, but it's so long. It's like, you know, a kilometer, I don't know how long, it's probably 500 meters long. And you know, around the night market is all the stalls. They're selling the food, but they're also selling other things. And each one has a table. So this is an outdoor market. So what you could have is that, so maybe the next public space iteration is going to be night markets. Or you have a big field and you have tables. And so people are, you know, 4, 6, 8 people, you know, so it's because now they're saying that we can have groups of 10. And so like groups of 10, so a table of 10, table here, and 2 meters away is a table of 10, and 2 meters away is a table of 10, and 2 meters away is a table of 10. And you sit there and you order everything on your phone, and they have like some drone delivering it to your table because it's all a high tech, blah, blah, blah. And then on one end, you have the Rio Plata is playing Boca Juniors, okay, and they're on the big screen over here, and on the other screen you have Shakira is giving a concert, and so I don't know, whatever, and so but this is now public space that you're doing this sort of outdoors, and you're doing it socially distanced, but you're also doing it with the virtual reality of the football or the concert or the whatever it is. And so then all those entertainment things are going to go into like this hermetically sealed kind of space. Like the NBA, the basketball player, they're going to go play in Walt Disney World. They're going to finish their season in Orlando. Like all 32 teams or 30 teams are going there. They're just going to play all their games on one court, like one after the other. So, you know, maybe the next thing is to have, that would be really interesting. Like how are they going to do the Hajj next year? I mean, this year they canceled the Hajj. So how are they going to do it next year? Because the Saudis are not going to want a whole bunch of, you know, Indonesians and Moroccans and stuff like that turning up, you know, and they can't do that anymore. So how the hell are they going to do the Hajj? Are we going to have are we going to have like, well, so think about it this. So think about every mosque in the world is oriented towards Mecca. Okay. So maybe there's a way that you could start to have public space or places that are then oriented towards something, so that you'll have a communal experience, but it's in isolation. And that's like the soccer, or like church services are like this. You're sort of having, everyone's having church services. They were talking about the people talking about schools. If schools went online, then what would happen is that the really good professors would give lectures, but then everyone would be online in different places. So maybe there's this whole notion of satellite schools or satellite places around in neighborhoods, getting back to the 15-minute neighborhood, that you have a satellite unit of a place that would be like the square or the town square or the village, the green or something like that, where you would go and you would take your classes for whatever university you would take school. Harvard would be, you could take your class there, and you could also watch the football games, and you could also go to a service or something like that, like a church service. And so you have this whole notion of all these satellite things that are connected by technology. And so you're socially distanced, you're not cross-pollinating a lot, but you're still in communication with. So that's my answer. That's my answer, is that satellite, or a series of spaces. And we can actually go back to the Law of the Indies, because the Law of the Indies was, the Spanish said every town in America is going to have, well, not in America, is going to have the same structure. It's going to have a cathedral, it's going to have a square, it's going to have a market, and it's going to be oriented at whatever degrees it was. So maybe we'll have this thing where we have this whole series of satellite structures that are somewhat uniform, and they're tied into the rest of the world. So we don't have to travel everywhere, but we're still in communication. We're still in communion with everyone else. I think in the end, what's going to happen is that projects will start to, instead of going 3 times or 4 times a year to a site, you will go once, and then everything else will be virtual. You can do site visits with a drone. I do site visits on Google Earth. But again, this goes back to this technology question. 10 years ago or 15 years ago, there was no Google Earth. And so we didn't even know that we could do this. Now that we know we can do it, we're like, oh, let's do it this way. But we didn't know that. And like, why did Google decide to set up Google Earth? I have no idea.